Hello everyone, this is Varsha. Welcome to Programming Knowledge. So in the previous tutorial, we learned how does an automation tool work and how does it overcome the challenges in manual testing. In this tutorial, we will learn about the Selenium framework, why is it called as a framework, and what are its advantages and disadvantages and its components. So let's get started. Now here as an automation tool, we will be studying the Selenium WebDriver. For this, you need to have some prior knowledge about the Java, and I have also explained what are the requirements of an automation tester. I will give the link in the description box. So when you go for an interview as an automation tester, the very first question that comes to you is, what is Selenium? See, this is very important. Before mastering your skills in Selenium, you need to know what is Selenium, its components, its advantages and disadvantages, and what are the different types of frameworks. So we will be studying about Selenium today. So first, let us understand what is Selenium. Selenium is a portable framework for testing web applications. Now here, there are three terms to understand in this definition. One is portable, second is framework, third is web application. Now what is portable? Portable in general, it means to be easily transported or relocated. That is the meaning of portable. Now what is framework? Framework, we can divide the word framework into two parts, frame plus work. That is, we work in a frame, like here you can see this house, right? This is a house frame or a basic structure or a supporting structure. With the help of this structure, we will be able to build a house. So this is a framework. So framework just gives us the basic structure which will add our code for greater functionality of the system. Now you must be thinking, why do we use framework? We use framework for reusability. And we don't need to build things from scratch. Like suppose, let us take up an example. If you're making a dynamic web page, and what will you do? You will create folders like suppose index.html, then style.css, validate.php, and etc. See, the problem here is not that you have to create folders, but the problem is that you have to follow the same process again and again. But if you use a framework, we don't have to worry about that. You just need to code your logic and that's it. So that's framework. Framework just gives us the basic structure round which we will add our code for greater functionality of the system. Okay, that's framework. Next, we have web applications. Now there are basically three types of applications: web-based application, desktop application, and mobile applications. Web-based applications are applications that can be accessed through browsers. That is like the online forms, the registration forms. Those are online-based applications. Then we have the desktop application. The desktop applications are the applications in which we install in the local system. For example, the Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint. That's your desktop application. Mobile applications are applications we install in our mobile through a Play Store. We download some apps like WhatsApp, Flipkart, Amazon. Those are mobile applications. Now Selenium is a portable framework for testing only web applications. Selenium tests only web applications. That is the application that can be accessed through browsers. This also serves as a limitation, but we will discuss that later. So moving forward, why Selenium? First thing, we will choose Selenium because of cost. Selenium is free, it is open source. As compared to the other tools like Qtp and UFT, they are paid. The second point is flexibility. Selenium supports multiple programming languages like Java, C#, Python, Ruby, and many more. Whereas if you go to some other tool like Qtp, it supports only VB script. Next is the multiple browsers. Selenium supports multiple browsers like Chrome, Firefox, Safari, and many more. Whereas if you take Qtp as a Selenium tool, it supports only Chrome. It also supports multiple OS like Windows, Linux, Apple, and many more. The main important point is that why are we using Selenium? Because it supports parallel testing. Now let me tell you what is parallel testing. The browser will execute the commands in two ways. One is the parallel execution, second is the cross-browser execution. Now here you see on the screen parallel execution. Let us understand that first. Parallel executions are execution in which the test scripts opens all the browser at the same time and executes at the same time. It's called as parallel execution. Here you can see there is a test scripts. Then you can see there are three browsers over here. The first one is Chrome, the second is the Firefox, the third is the Internet Explorer. So the test script will open all the browser at the same time and execute it at the same time. This is parallel execution. I will explain it with an example. Just wait. First understand what is cross-browser execution. Cross-browser execution. Let us take up an example. Like suppose in the test script over here, it is written to insert some value in the drop-down menu. So this command will be first executed in the Chrome browser. When the execution is finished, that is when the value is inserted in the drop-down menu, then the Firefox browser will be opened. And the command to insert the value in the drop-down box will be executed. And when that command is executed, then the Internet Explorer will be opened and the command will be executed. So this is called cross-browser execution. That means the test script will open the Chrome browser first. After 2-3 minutes when the execution is done, it opens the Firefox browser. And then after some time, it will open the Internet Explorer browser. This is cross-browser execution. Whereas in parallel execution, if we have the same command to insert some value in the drop-down menu, then this command will be executed in all the browsers at the same time. This is parallel execution. And Selenium supports parallel execution. Now let's move a little deeper towards the Selenium. We will study the Selenium components which comprises of the Selenium suite. Total we have the 4 components like the IDE, RC, WebDriver and Grid. Let us discuss IDE first. Now the Selenium IDE is the most simplest tool in the entire suites of Selenium. It is nothing but an integrated development environment. See, earlier this IDE was simply just a Firefox extension and it's just a play around tool. Like, you just play record functionality. Mainly it is used for prototyping and it is used only for demo purposes. You cannot use IDE for creating automation real-time projects because of its some limitations. We will discuss those limitations later. Then the next component is the RC, that is the Selenium remote control. It is used to write web application tests in different programming languages. It interacts with the browser with the help of the RC server, through which we can interact to the web browser. But this RC server got deprecated in the Selenium version 2 and was replaced by the WebDriver in the Selenium version 3. We will discuss that also, why it happened. The next component is the Selenium WebDriver. The Selenium WebDriver is one of the most important components in the Selenium suites. It is an API to create and execute the test cases and it is a successor of RC. Basically, the Selenium WebDriver is a collection of open source API and which will be used to automate the testing of a web application. As I said, we will study the Selenium WebDriver very deeply. The next component is Grid. The Selenium Grid is used to run multiple test scripts simultaneously on the different browser and platforms. And it supports parallel testing. What is parallel testing? I explained in the previous slide. So because of Grid, Selenium supports parallel testing. So these are the 4 components in Selenium. Let us discuss the drawbacks of IDE. The first drawback. Selenium IDE is a Mozilla Firefox plugin, which means the tests can be recorded only in the Firefox browser and not in any other browser. Second, it's not suitable for dynamic web pages, because it is just a prototyping tool which works well only with the static web pages and not with the dynamic web pages. Third, data-driven testing is not possible. Fourth, cannot provide detailed test reports, whereas RC, the next version of IDE, can provide detailed reports. Then we cannot perform database testing through IDE, same because it is just a prototyping tool. It is used for demo and it is not used for automating web applications. Due to these drawbacks, RC came into picture. Now we have discussed the components of Selenium. Let's see the versions of Selenium. Here we have total 4 versions. Selenium version 1, Selenium version 2, 3 and 4. Now see, here we will dig into some history of the Selenium. Here the Selenium version 1, we have the Selenium IDE, RC plus grid. So when Jason Huggins introduced the Selenium, the tool was called as a JavaScript program. He called it as a JavaScript test runner. But he had one major issue that is called as the same origin policy. So now you must be thinking that what is this same origin policy? This policy says that when JavaScript is executed in the domain, it can access the web pages in that domain only, and it cannot access any other web page in the another domain. For example, suppose like a web page in the Google, like if you have a domain google.com. Okay, so you can access the search bar, the email, the drive, but that can be accessible, but nothing can be accessible outside the google.com. Like if you want to access Yahoo, Myntra or Amazon or any other domain, that cannot be accessible. Definitely this is because of some security reasons, so that is why this is called as the same origin policy. Now to overcome this policy, remote control server was designed. That is the Selenium RC. Now the main reason to create this server was to trick the browser in believing that the Selenium code in which we are running the scripts and the web application under test are in the same domain. Now here this same origin policy is solved. So this was the version 1 of Selenium, where we have the IDE, RC and grid, where the same origin policy was solved in the version 1. Then comes the Selenium version 2. Here we have the IDE, the WebDriver, the RC and the grid. See, in 2007 when Simon Stewart, he invented this WebDriver. Now why did he invent this WebDriver? Because the architecture of the RC was very complicated. And in RC we need a separate server to talk to this. Like we need a separate server to talk to the browser. So what he did is he removed the requirement of the separate server, and this is the Selenium version 2 where the WebDriver was introduced. Now why, you must be thinking like why WebDriver and RC is introduced over here in the version 2? Because the WebDriver was in the development phase and they were trying to implement it. So that is the reason why we have in the Selenium version 2 the IDE, the WebDriver, the RC and the grid. So in the Selenium version 3 we had the IDE, WebDriver and grid. Here you see that the RC was completely deprecated and we only have the WebDriver. Currently we have the Selenium version 4. There have many new features. This is the new version of Selenium 4 and now it is still in development. Recently there was a version known as alpha version was introduced, and this version was mainly introduced because of complete W3C protocol adoption. But this change in protocol isn't going to impact any of the user, because many major of the browser drivers like the Firefox, the Chrome driver, and they all are included in the Selenium 3.8 version, which we are going to use. And I will be also explaining, explaining some of the features of the Selenium 4th version. We will do that also. Like there are many ways to take screenshot in the Selenium 4 version. There are 2 to 3 methods. So there are new APIs added, there are some ways to access the web elements also, and there are some of the features that are very new introduced in the Selenium version. So mainly we will be studying about the Selenium WebDriver. Now you must be thinking, why Selenium WebDriver? Now why are we studying the Selenium WebDriver? For that we need to know the drawbacks of the Selenium RC. Now this is the architecture of the Selenium RC. This is the main reason why we are studying the WebDriver. So the Selenium RC is a test tool that allows you to write automated web applications in various programming languages like Java, Python, Ruby. So let's see the architecture of Selenium RC. First, we need to write the test scripts in supported languages like Java, Python or any other supported language. But before writing these test scripts, the major requirement in RC is the RC server. So first you need to start the RC server before you run a code, and this RC server is a separate application. This RC is responsible for receiving the Selenium command from your test scripts. It interprets them and then reports the result back to the script. Now I use the word Selenium over here. Now what is the Selenium commands? They are nothing but the commands that are written in the test scripts are called as Selenium commands. In IDE and RC they are called as Selenium commands. Now let's look at the browser interaction. How the browser interacts. The browser interactions happens through the RC server. This RC server is a simple HTTP post and HTTP GET request to communicate, okay? It uses the simple HTTP post and GET request to communicate to the browser. Now how this communication happens? This RC server acts like a proxy. Now you see there's a complete cycle starting from your test script, then the RC server injects the JavaScript in the web browser, runs your commands, takes back the results, sends it to the RC server, and then the result is displayed. This whole cycle gets repeated for each and every command which is written in the test scripts. This is how the test case gets executed in the RC server. Like the Selenium RC tool, this is how the whole cycle goes for each and every test scripts. Now everything was good, but why was RC not good enough to run test scripts? Let me tell you why. What are those drawbacks? First, time taken for execution of command is longer. Why? Because there is an additional server RC so it executes each and every command is executed through the RC. So it takes a lot of time for execution. The APIs supported by RC are redundant and confusing because one command means many meaning. It has a lot of meaning for one command. Like suppose there is a command called as click and click at. So which one to use? It's very confusing for the developers. Then there is complicated architecture. RC consists of an additional server that acts as a middleman. Also the mobile apps cannot be tested using RC. So these are the drawbacks of RC. Now let's see how does Selenium WebDriver overcome these drawbacks. For this we need to understand the architecture of the WebDriver. So in the WebDriver architecture we have the test scripts, the web browser and the web server. However, we do not have an additional server for communication like the RC server, which we saw in the Selenium RC, which makes the architecture of the WebDriver very, very easy because we don't have an additional server in this. As you can see, there are direct interactions with the web browser. So as an advantage, the Selenium does not use an additional server. And since there is no intermediate server there, then the browser is controlled directly from the system. Due to this direct communication, the overall cycle that we saw in the RC server which was very indirect communication. Since this indirect communication made the execution very slow, so that's why we have the WebDriver in which the execution is faster than the RC server. As you can see, the execution time for command is shorter due to this simple architecture. Now you have seen the architecture of RC and WebDriver. Let's compare the Selenium RC and the Selenium WebDriver. Let's see in terms of API. Now RC is less object-oriented API. Now the API in RC is very confusing and redundant. For example, we have commands like click or click at commands. Which one to use? So it was very confusing for the developers, and the direct browsers interpreted different commands also, which was very challenging for the developers working on different browsers. For different browsers there were different commands. So it was very challenging. Whereas for Selenium WebDriver, it is very simpler API and it is very easier to use. For example, we have the click function to click on the web element. We have the send key command to send text on any web element in the web page. So it has a very simpler API. Now let's see in terms of speed. Selenium RC is slow in execution. And in terms of speed, WebDriver is faster in execution. Because in Selenium RC we have the RC server, whereas in WebDriver there is no additional server. Next, let's see in terms of browser support. See, RC and WebDriver supports multiple browser, but RC does not have support for HTML unit, which is a headless browser. Now let's see what is this headless browser. Headless browser is a browser which does not have a UI. This helps to make testing more faster. Because it does not need a real browser for testing, it does not take time to load the web elements. So, and the headless browser is very quick. So, RC and WebDriver, they support multiple browser, but RC does not support HTML unit, that is the headless browser. Whereas the WebDriver supports the headless browser, and it makes the execution more faster. Next, we have the comparison in terms of testing mobile applications. Selenium RC does not support testing of mobile applications, whereas Selenium WebDriver, it supports testing of mobile applications. There is an application name as APM through which we can test mobile applications. So these were the difference between the RC and the WebDriver. But every component has its own drawbacks. So let us see the drawbacks of WebDriver. 1. Cannot readily support new browsers, but RC can. And it does not have a built-in command for automatic generation of test results. See, it cannot readily support new browsers. There are many new versions coming up. So this challenge can be overcome. Second, we don't have built-in commands for automatic generation of test results, whereas in RC we can generate test results. There is a proper format in RC. Whereas in WebDriver we don't, but we can use a third-party tool. We can integrate third-party tools for the test results generation. So now we will discuss some advantages and disadvantages of Selenium. Advantages of Selenium. Selenium is an open source tool, and it supports multiple operating systems and multiple browsers like Chrome, Safari, Internet Explorer, and many more. It also supports multiple programming languages like Java, Python, C#, Ruby, etc. Apart from all this, we can also integrate the third-party tools in Selenium like Apache POI, AutoIT, SQL, and why do we need to integrate this? We will understand that in the next slide. Here you see the disadvantages of Selenium. The first disadvantage is that it cannot support window-based application. It can only support the web-based application. But to overcome this disadvantage, we can use a third-party tool, that is the AutoIT or the SQL tool. The second is that it cannot support test reports, but if we integrate TestNG or extend reports, through that we can generate test reports. Third, cannot support Excel files. Now you must be thinking, why do we use Excel files? We use Excel files while we are doing the data-driven testing. We use it because suppose there is a username and a password field, and there are many test data to it. Like for username you have the admin, for password you have admin@123. That's one test data. The second test data, third, fourth. So like this, there can be many test data. To check the expected and the output result, we will match it and then we will pass the status as fail or pass. So matching those and results and communicating the test scripts to the Excel files, that Selenium cannot support that. But through Apache POI, we can do it. Next, we have less or no technical support in Selenium because Selenium is an open source tool, so there is very less or technical support. But there are many forums and communities on internet wherever you can write your queries and you can get your answers. Then writing test cases are sometimes very time consuming because it is just a programming interface and not an IDE. See, whereas if you go in other tools like the QTP and UFT, those are IDE as well as the programming interface. That means you can record also. You can record also the test scripts that you have written. Whereas over here, it is just a programming interface. Each and every command needs to be written. So at times it becomes very time consuming. So these are the disadvantages of Selenium. Till now, we have learned what is Selenium, why is it called as a framework. We have learned the versions of Selenium, their components, their drawbacks, and why are we studying the WebDriver. We have also learned what are the advantages and disadvantages. So in the next tutorial, in the next video, we will learn the installation part of Selenium and then we will start the implementation of Selenium. Until then, stay tuned and thank you. Please like, share and subscribe.